morning. It's great to be with you all today. The messages that I'm going to have, and I should have some slides that should be coming up. The messages that I have with you are pretty simple. At the highlight, what I'd like to share just by way of introductions are plug-in electric vehicles, PEVs, are coming. Based on my experience in the cellular arena 20 years ago, what we see is there may be a fat tail on the estimated demand for plug-in vehicles. That means that there's more likelihood that the actual demand that we see from customers will be substantially higher than estimates rather than right on target or below estimates. The impact from plug-in electric vehicles on the grid could be very substantial, and therefore it's important that auto manufacturers, policymakers, and electric utilities work together very closely. And if they do not, then there could be very significant consequences as a result. So it just underscores the need. If I could have my first slide. Okay, it looks like you don't have slides, so let me just go forward without them. So the point to be made is that with plug-in electric vehicles, the estimates from the Edison Electric Institute are that the impact could be that we could have a reduction in the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere of 400 to 500 million tons per year. In addition, as the governor pointed out rightly, we have the opportunity to very substantially reduce our dependence on foreign sources of oil. And given the nature of demand for oil, just a 10 or 20% drop in oil demand could absolutely drive the prices of oil down, which I think could have a very positive effect in the international arena and certainly for our economy. What we've seen is in California that the plug-in hybrids have been very positively received. And what we've seen from that is that despite the fact that California has about 12% of the population of the United States, in our territory at least, what we've seen is on the order of about 25% of the demand for plug-in electric vehicles. So therefore, we think that it's very likely that what we're going to see is that, again, with the plug-in electric vehicles, that San Francisco and our territory, Northern California and Central California, will be the epicenter of what will happen there. What we've looked at is the impact of that on the electric grid. Very importantly, if you take a look at peak electric demand in San Francisco, that runs on the order of about 1.8 kilowatts. If you look out in more towards the inland areas like the Central Valley, but even just in San Ramon, which is only about 20 miles from San Francisco, heading to the east, that rises the average peak load to about 6.6 kilowatts. So it's about 3 times the load in San Francisco. What we see is there are 2 opportunities with respect to the electric car. There is first, on the one hand, charging at 110. And in that case, the charge time takes about 6 to 7 hours currently are the estimates. However, if you step it up to 220, what you see is the charge times go down to 2 and 3 hours. And so we think that there'll be a substantial preference on the part of customers heading in the direction of 220, and we're trying to prepare for both. The issue is that at 110, the draw on the system is about the same as San Francisco. What we're talking about is about 1.8 or 2 kilowatts of draw. However, at 220, what you're going to see is about 6.6 kilowatts. So, in other words, adding an electric vehicle at 220 is like adding another home to the network or to the system, and that would be a home in the San Ramon area, or where people use a lot of air conditioning. It would be the equivalent of adding 3 homes in San Francisco. So what you see is that this will very substantially increase the demand on the system. And the big problem is, and the nightmare that we're concerned about, is that you have a very hot day, business is running the air conditioning, running the lights, people go home, They've had their air conditioning turned down all day or off. They turn on the air conditioning, they turn on the lights, and then they plug in their vehicle charging. And if that were a 220, the results would be pretty dramatic and pretty negative. And you would create a peak on top of the current peak load. The effect of which could be to bring down the electric system if you had a substantial concentration of electric cars in the area. And that's something we want to avoid. Now, the way we intend to address that system or that problem is that what we would do is we'd like to install a 220 interface in garages, and that would have a timer on it, and it would also be subject to dynamic pricing. The effect of that is to encourage customers to really have the car charging between, let's say, 11 o'clock at night and 4 or 5 in the morning, which are very much the off-peak times of the day. And so we would be using the grid when the grid is most available and when generation facilities are most available. Now, the reason that that's important is that what we found is the dispersion of people that have plug-in hybrids is not at all homogeneous. And in fact, there are great differences in our system between those areas that have lots of concentration and those that don't. For example, Berkeley being what Berkeley is, we found that 18% of the plug-in hybrids were in Berkeley in our territory, whereas if you look to Fresno, what you would see is there was a mere 2.4%. So the message I'm sending is if we think about the peninsula, Silicon Valley, we think about Berkeley, we think about Marin, we think there's going to be a tremendous concentration of electric vehicles there. So think about that. If you have a circuit going into a neighborhood and each electric vehicle you add at 220 is like adding another home, or in Berkeley it might be adding like 2 or 3 more homes, you can see what happens if 3 to 5 electric vehicles show up in one neighborhood. You're going to overwhelm the electric circuits, and that will lead to blackouts and other problems. So the point to be made is the automotive industry, policymakers, and also the electric utilities need to go to work as early as possible to deal with this great opportunity. We see it as an opportunity, but on the other hand, it also could be a challenge of very significant proportions, and that's not what we want to see. So I think the last point I'd make is if this is like cellular phones, when a lot of people said, oh yeah, we're going to have cellular phone penetration and it's going to be about 2% of the population, and that was viewed as pie in the sky, all you have to do is look around at your colleagues and look at the penetration, which in this room is at least 100%, if not over 100%. And you can see that if we have that kind of experience with electric vehicles, we could have a real problem. You know, they represent a tremendous opportunity for reducing CO2 emissions, which is so critical in this time when we're all concerned about climate change. They have the opportunity to really drive demand for oil down and ease our dependence on the Middle East and other areas of the world. They also create an opportunity to greatly reduce fuel costs. If gas costs are, $3 or $4 a gallon. So in sum, PG&E sees it as a tremendous opportunity. We are moving rapidly towards it. We're embracing the opportunity, and we're also thinking through what has to be done to make this work for us, for our customers, for policymakers, and everyone in this room. Thank you.